Cristiano Ronaldo has said it. The Saudi League is better than Major League Soccer, the league that Lionel Messi has just arrived. Is it though? Hi, Engineer I'm Filippo, and welcome to Tactical Manager TV, and welcome to a new series we're trying to bring here to the channel where I bring guests that disagree with me to debate and discuss a topic. And today it's going to be the Saudi League versus Major League Soccer. Personally, I think the Saudi League is better than Major League Soccer right now, based off the signings and other information and data that I will provide throughout the video. They think it's MLS. We are going to debate. I'm going to try to convince them. I'm also going to try to convince you. So before you hate on me, if you're an MLS fan, I'm not an MLS hater. I'm actually an MLS fan. So understand what I'm going to say throughout the video, and then let me know if I change your mind. If you think the Saudi League is better than MLS or MLS is better than the Saudi League, I'll make the points throughout the video. And just to be fair, we're talking strictly about the quality of the senior teams. As a league, the infrastructure, youth academies, MLS is far ahead of the Saudi League. Now, before we start, drop a like or dislike, whatever you want. Okay, everyone. So Cristiano Ronaldo decided to attack Lionel Messi once again, but by attacking Lionel Messi, he brought up the leagues, the Saudi League and Major League Soccer. So today we're going to have a very healthy discussion, debate here, hopefully healthy discussion and debate here in regards to our positions of these two leagues. At the end of the day, no one here is an expert on the Saudi League. We're going to share perspectives based off data information that we have, and we're going to try to draw a conclusion of which league is better. But as I said, you can't really determine which league is better. It's not like the Premier League being compared to MLS, where there's like a general consensus and opinion that's like it's better. This one here, we're probably not going to get to a conclusion. We're going to debate, talk, and then you watching the video can let us know in the comment section, what did you think? Who do you side with? I think the Saudi League is better. Kelvin is more towards MLS, right? But he's like somewhere in between two, and Cheyenne will be mostly defending MLS. But before we start, let me introduce our guest. This is Kelvin, journalist from Bola VIP and Urban Pitch. And then we have Cheyenne, which you guys probably know him by now from Next Generation Football, a big Sounders fan, big Iran fan, and big U.S. men's national team hater.
He couldn't have said it any better. That was actually pretty spot on, to be honest.
And Kelvin's not a USMNT hater, other way around. But why don't we start with this? Why don't we start with this? Defender. Yeah, defender. Why don't we start with this? Cristiano Ronaldo said that the Saudi League is better. And if you go back maybe a year ago, I would highly disagree with him. Even though a lot of things that I'm going to mention here have opened my mind towards that league, I still don't think it's a good league. And what we're discussing here today is competitiveness of the senior teams in the league. A couple of things to make it clear. MLS has better infrastructure. It's not debatable. Better youth academies. And it's just a more well-organized, established league at the moment, right? Better stadiums too, even though there's some great stadiums there. But as a whole, MLS, again, we have 30 teams here in MLS. They have 16 or 18 right now in the Saudi League. And there's also probably the whole thing of parity. MLS has more parity. The league there, the top 3-4 teams are probably far better than the other ones. And we're going to go through all that very soon. Kelvin, let's start with you here. Which league do you think is more competitive at the senior level as it stands right now, and why? A quick answer, then we're going to dive into the points.
Well, quickly, I think it has to be Major League Soccer, because Major League Soccer has had a 30-year progression, which I think we've all seen. And the points that you made about an infrastructure, academies, more often than not, especially since I live here in South America, I've seen a lot of interviews over the years of players who have been in the Middle East and in Saudi Arabia come back to Argentina or to Uruguay or to Brazil and kind of always say, well, it was nice to play there, but really it was lax. That doesn't mean that's not going to change now. I think this is probably the big step that Saudi Arabia needed to take to finally break through the door and try to really start to position themselves. But I think overall, MLS, for various reasons, I think is a step ahead of the Saudi Arabian League. While I do think culturally there are certain things that maybe the Saudi Arabian or the Saudi Arabian top teams are doing better than some teams in MLS. But I think overall it has to be Major League Soccer. I think we've just seen so much progression over the last 30 years that it's pretty clear that MLS is, and the national teams obviously has to also come into question. I think overall the average American player is probably better than the average Saudi Arabian player.
That I totally agree with. Even though we tied them in a terrible game last year in the friendly, but with Saudi league's players and most of the best American players don't play in MLS. That must be said too. But Cheyenne, now you MLS or Saudi league and why? I know your answer, but your justification, quick justification, just like Kelvin.
I think, as you said, obviously my answer is going to go towards MLS, but I think a good point to bring up is right now with the Saudi league, it's great strides that they're making, bringing in these big name players. But does this not remind you of like early doors MLS when the league was like very heavily criticized, how they were just bringing in big names, the past in
They're
big names?
bringing players in their prime, Cheyenne, though a bit
Somewhat,
different.
some,
I'll
no,
mention
some
the
of
name
them.
soon. I'll mention the
Yeah,
names.
yeah.
Yeah.
I don't remember the list exactly, but there are some, sure. I'll give it to you there. There are some, but there are some past it players. We can't deny it. But it's like, it's almost just really good advertisement that the league is bringing in. And this just kind of reminds me of early doors MLS, where I think MLS is now, minus the Messi coming into the league, have actually really kind of gone away from it a lot more. And so for me, I just think Saudi Arabia is more of like they're just starting to now dip their toes into properly investing in their league compared to MLS, where now you see that now they're a league that can develop players, bring in players. There's like more of a healthy ecosystem, you could say.
I agree with that part. I agree with that part, and that's what I'm going to add to it. I think at this moment, I do think the Saudi league is better, and if they if they finalize some of the signings that they're still negotiating, right, they're going to make more signings. It'll consolidate that point even more. Long term, if you say 10 years from now, Saudi league or MLS, I'm going to say MLS. I think the long term perspective of MLS is much better because of mainly the points you all said. I agreed with all the points you guys made. Besides the fact that MLS is better right now. But before we go back to this, let me list then a few of the names they signed, right? And I do want to make one point too, because a lot of people like to say that the league is terrible, full of scrubs. But regardless of what we think, the Saudi team that we saw in the World Cup that defeated Argentina, don't get me wrong, they would lose to Argentina 9 out of 10. That was the one time they beat them. But if they beat Argentina that one time, it's not a team of scrubs, right? There's something there. And out of Asia, they are one of the best national teams there. They're not a joke. And those players all play in the Saudi league. So just to get that out of the way, and then we're going to talk about the Club World Cup, which Sounders fan right here will be able to. Uh, we'll talk about that. So here are the players for both of you: Cristiano Ronaldo, obviously, Karim Benzema, Roberto Firmino, Kante, Mendy, the goalkeeper that was with Chelsea, Ruben Neves, that was with Wolves, very good Portuguese midfielder. Jota, the one that played for Celtic, right? Not the Jota from Liverpool, but still very good player. They paid 30 million for him. Koulibaly, center back that was with Napoli, didn't have a great season with Chelsea, still very good center back. Brozovic, that literally started for Croatia in the World Cup in the semifinal run. Savic, a very good box to box midfielder from Lazio. And they're currently negotiating. A few names they're negotiating doesn't mean they'll close. Fabinho from Liverpool, Mitrovic from Fulham. Apparently, he agreed to personal terms, but they're trying to negotiate with Fulham. A player that you, Kelvin, will know very well, and they're close to signing him right now, Gustavo Gomes from Palmeiras, arguably maybe the best center back in South America right now. And they're close. Like he agreed to them, and Palmeiras is willing to sell. And then you have obviously a few speculative names like Bernardo Silva, Ziyech. Out of these names I listed, a lot of these players are not players MLS could bring right now. Just to be honest, a few of these they wouldn't be able to unless they massively overpaid, like Saudi Arabia is doing. Now, to be fair, what you guys said is true. What MLS is doing is sustainable. What Saudi Arabia is doing, it'll just go as far as the government injects money, right? As soon
Yeah.
as they stop, it's over. MLS is actually a business of its own. Like it or not, MLS, if you're watching this, it's a business of its own. So the points I made here right now, let me ask you first, Kelvin, this question. And this doesn't really define league quality, of course, but the first question: if we built the best 11 of the Saudi league against the best 11 of Major League Soccer, anything can happen. But which one would be better?
I think that, I mean, based on the names that you threw out right now, I think we would probably be evenly matched because I think there are a lot of young guys in MLS that could surprise a lot of players and a lot of people. Yeah, when you throw out a name like Kareem Benzema, I mean, I don't think there's a striker in MLS that probably compares to the quality of Kareem Benzema. I actually saw him playing recently with Real Madrid against Celta de Vigo, and I saw things that he was doing on the field, which I was like, "Fine, this is why this guy is clearly one of the best strikers in the world, and could have probably stayed at Real Madrid." Um, but it's a toss up kind of in a way. I guess I don't want to stand here and be like an MLS super defender, but I think that it could be an evenly matched pairing. I think there's a lot of quality in MLS. I mean, if Lorenzo Insigne kind of finds his love for MLS, I know he's in a terrible situation in Toronto, and he plays at his best. Hooking up with Messi, let's say. I mean, a lot of beautiful things can happen on the field, and the same thing with the guys in the Saudi side. I think I'm actually going to go on a different route. I think the debate can't be the superstars because clearly, one league is throwing money, they're signing superstars. Another league is throwing money, and they're signing specific superstars as well. I think we need to dig in maybe a little bit deeper and take a look at the
Oh, we'll get
quality
there.
within the quality. All right,
We'll get
so
there. That's like the first question. That's the first
yeah,
part.
I mean, I'm at a standstill. I mean, like I said, I don't know. I mean, on a good day, I think either or. I mean, it's basically like an Argentina Brazil. Like on a good day, one guy's
Yeah.
gonna win, another day the other
The
guy's
thing
gonna win.
is, I look into MLS and then I see a player like Hani Mukhtar play the way he's playing in that league. The guy is just simply amazing in MLS. And we saw him in Europe and it wasn't anything special. But we're talking about a list of players here where I think 90% of the players I mentioned all have done and still were doing something special in Europe, right? Uh, and that's my point. I think when it looks to star power, the Saudi league did surpass MLS quickly right now, just because also they're overpaying for everyone, right? Otherwise, it wouldn't have
Yeah,
changed.
I,
But
I
Shai,
think that's the clear thing right now. I mean, there's an overpaying, but hey, that's the market they want to do.
Mhm.
And what is their structure in the end based on that? But yeah, I don't know. I mean,
it,
I really believe it's a toss
no,
up.
and to be
It
fair,
may
this
be an
doesn't mean
advantage to
anything.
the Saudi league.
Yeah, and
It
to be fair,
may
this
be an
doesn't mean
advantage.
anything. This doesn't mean anything in terms of like which league is better. I'm just trying to bring up points to get people to get to know the leagues a bit better. Cheyenne, if it was the star power right now, the best 11 of these stars that they have in the Saudi league versus the best 11 we have in Major League Soccer, uh, which one do you think has more quality? Not who would win. We can't tell.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of brought up the point too, how Saudi Arabia and maybe 9 times out of 10 wouldn't beat Argentina in that World Cup game, but they did. And we've seen the MLS All Stars face off against, a B team Arsenal, a B team AS Roma. Actually, it was an A team AS Roma, B team Real Madrid. So they've played against big teams. They've taken them to penalty shootouts, sometimes won the games, being Bayern Munich. But when you look at the players that the Saudi Pro League has brought in, they brought in a recent Ballon d'Or winner who, I mean, and not even just him. You think about Jota from Celtic. You think
Mhm.
about Ruben Neves from Wolves. I mean, a guy that was like
Brozovic.
Brozovic. I don't know. I think Brozovic.
Champions League final and World Cup semifinalist. He is
He
absolutely fantastic.
he's not. I'm not saying he's not, but out of all the names, he's not the one that I'm like, wow,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
like that's crazy. But like, just the fact that you're able to draw those kind of players in and to have those guys on the team, yeah, you got to tip your hat that this if you compare XIs like head to head, the typical tactical manager TV video head to head, him versus him, who would win? You can't deny it. I mean, you got a last year's Ballon d'Or winner as your striker.
And we
I
have
just
Jesus Ferreira starting up top.
yes, exactly.
Hey, but MLS has the person who's won the most Ballon d'Ors,
That is
right?
true.
Well,
I do.
But we haven't seen him kick a ball. That's the thing is like we're
do
talking
we,
about
do,
Messi
do,
a
we-
lot.
do we need to see Messi kick a
I
ball? I
think
think
he'll
it's
be all
pretty
right. I
obvious.
think he'll
I
be all
think
right
he'll
in
be
MLS.
fine.
More than all right in this league. I think I
Uh,
think I think Messi's gonna make the argument clear that maybe the Saudi league might be better
but
when he starts
but
scoring 4 goals a
But
game.
Kelvin, I also wanted to add that the Saudi league also has there are these stars, but they also have some good South American players that you probably know. But I know a lot of the viewers that don't follow South America. They have Talisca there, Cuejar is there, Cuejar, the central defensive midfielder that played for Flamengo, Gustavo Gomes, Michael that was at the Flamengo team that lost to Palmeiras in the Libertadores final. So it's not just these players and Saudi players. There are players that if they were in MLS, these guys I mentioned, they would be fantastic players in MLS, maybe DPs.
I've seen a lot of I saw a lot of Celtic and Rangers this year, especially for the U because I was watching the U.S. men's national team guys. That Brazilian Jota, I really liked him a lot. All the games I saw him play for Celtic, I was like, this kid is really an impressive guy. And I think I tweeted it during one of the derbies that I was watching. I said some MLS team needs to sign this guy. I mean, this guy is very impressive. He's very impressive in Scotland. So yeah, I mean, there has to be second tier players that are really talented, really good playing in both leagues. But I think yeah, they're obviously spending a little bit more money on those second tier players than probably MLS teams are
Yeah,
right
I
now.
think I think what the Saudi league is trying to do, and correct me if I'm wrong, they first went for these big boys, right? The big names, Ronaldo, Benzema, because then when you go to a Gustavo Gomez, right, you're able to convince him, it's like Ronaldo's already here. The other way around is tougher. So I think that's what they did. And Gustavo Gomez, you can attest for that. If he came to Major League Soccer, he would actually be the best center back in the league right now.
Without question.
So and he's going there. They're also one thing Saudi Arabia is doing different from MLS too. Well, not different from MLS has some of those, but not as much. They're actually looking for like actual experienced European coaches and coaches with some track record of success. So I'm not saying Steven Gerrard is a good coach, but the guy knows the game at this point. Bring him in, the culture. They just got the coach from Botafogo that leads the Brazilian league. They took him from the team right now. So these things lead me to believe that there's more ambition right there. MLS is a bit slower with the way they react, a lot of roster restrictions. But I think this brings me to another point here that I want to ask both of you because now we have all the teams and I want to go to the Club World Cup to help make my point a little bit. So the data sample of a Club World Cup is tiny. So take it all with a grain of salt. Everyone here, let's be smart about it. But last year we had the Club World Cup here. Not here. I mean, in 2022 we had the Club World Cup, and the final was Real Madrid versus Al Hilal. Al Hilal is from Saudi Arabia. They're the best team in Saudi Arabia. They've won the league multiple times. They won the Champions League of Asia, I think 4 times. They're a very strong team. I'm sure Cheyenne is probably familiar with them. And they defeated in the semifinals Flamengo. And I know people are going to say it's one game. Sure, anything can happen. But the thing is, I watched that game. They were pretty even with Flamengo, a very strong team in South America. And unlike European teams, South American teams take that tournament extremely seriously. So Flamengo is not messing around. They literally lost. They literally lost. So when we talk about things like that, that shows that a team like Al Hilal, to me, that's one team, of course, that's not the league. That team looks like it's stronger than any MLS team right now. And obviously, and this was pre big name signings. This was
Yeah.
before these names, right? These were just with the players they already had. Do you guys agree with that take? That's not the league. You're not agreeing that the league is better, but that specific team.
Yeah, I would say off the bat that I think, and this is what I was saying in your first question. I think that there are certain teams in the Middle East, especially, and now we're focused on Saudi Arabia, but I'll be a little bit more general in the Middle East that have a little bit better club competition on the continental stages, better culture than Major League Soccer teams. I think. I saw that game against Flamengo. We in South America do take the Club World Cup extremely seriously. I think we were better when it was a one-off back in the day with the Copa Intercontinental and playing against the European champions because we could be better on the day. I think what happens sometimes with the South American teams when they get too busy thinking about getting to the final to play the European team that often they miscalculate or sometimes are prone to overconfidence against some of these other teams from other parts of the world, and that's why we're seeing so many upsets when it comes to the South American teams. But nonetheless, I still believe on just the club culture of playing international tournaments that the Middle East, and in this case, I'll even go as far as saying Saudi Arabian teams, or the top Saudi Arabian teams, are probably a bit more cultured in those kind of games than MLS sides who, it depends on the team really. Know how to handle playing international championships and international competitions. I think the average American soccer player is still way off on how to dealing with those kind of situations. And I think culturally, those kind of teams are just built and have a different kind of mindset. Continental championships are very important in all parts of the world, and they are important in MLS. But I just think that there's still something that the MLS player or American player in this case sometimes lacks.
Promotion, relegation, pressure.
No, I mean, come on. I don't think that's the case. I think it's
A little bit. Just a little bit.
Felipe. You know that there's a way to play a quarterfinal match in the Copa Libertadores. You cannot do it sometimes the way an MLS team would handle those kind of. You can't play it like a normal league game. It's a
I
different kind
think
of monster.
I think what happens in MLS, promotion relegation jokes aside, is also we don't really play many competitions outside of MLS besides like Liga MX. Maybe we should start facing more teams outside. CONCACAF should embrace it a bit more, get more CONCACAF nations involved, things like that. We're always playing just within MLS, and then the maximum we'll go is against the Liga MX team, and very often we play it in the US, like the Leagues Cup right now, right? It's going to be in the US.
Yeah, it's gonna
That
be in the
doesn't help.
U.S. But we have
Uh,
the CONCACAF. It's not the Champions League
Champions League,
anymore.
the
Is it still
they're
the?
changing,
Oh,
they're
they're
changing. Yeah.
changing the name. I think it's CCC now. That's what we have, and we're starting to get better at it. But still, when you start facing a quality of opponent that has now the potential of fielding Cristiano Ronaldo on the field, we're still lacking, and that's as clear as day. And I'm not going to sugarcoat that. I think MLS teams need to do a much better job of trying to build the culture of playing these kind of games because they are different animals. They really, really are different games. It might not seem to the naked eye that they're different, but they are. There's a level of intensity. There's a way these teams defend. There's a way these teams commit fouls in these kind of games. And I think we're still kind of off in that regard.
Mentality. I think the U.S. youth national team U20 saw that when they played Uruguay in the U20 World Cup. We weren't worse. We weren't worse from a technical
Perfect
standpoint,
example.
but the
Perfect
mentality, it
example.
was just you could see that like the quality was very similar actually in terms of talent, but it was just like Uruguay just had that killer mentality in the final third and defending, and we couldn't beat them in a cup game. That's what happened. But let's pick up from where you said and bring it to Cheyenne. Cheyenne, your team, the Seattle Sounders, was in the same Club World Cup that we just mentioned. They lost in the quarterfinals, which is like the second, not even quarterfinals, like the second round, the round before the semifinals, to Al Ali, which is from Egypt, that went on to get destroyed by Real Madrid 4-1, and then went on to lose to Flamengo 4-2. So, again, the Sounders lost to a team that was defeated by Al Hilal, if that makes any sense. And I know some people at the time, they were arguing that MLS is not sending their best. LAFC is the best. Yeah, sure. LAFC is the best team in MLS at the moment, but the Sounders they are one of the top teams in MLS. The Sounders earned their spot there by winning the CONCACAF Champions League. And just like this season, the Sounders are top 4 of their conference, easily can reach number 1, number 2. So again, it's not like MLS sent a scrub team. They sent a team that has been consistently good in MLS. I don't care what people say. If we sent LAFC, sure, maybe they would beat Al Ali or whatever. Maybe they'd probably lose to Flamengo right after in Real Madrid. But that's what happened. Talk about your experience in that tournament when you watched the game. The Sounders facing an Egyptian team. They didn't even face the Saudi team.
Yeah, I think, to add to your guys' points, I think Kelvin makes a lot of great points, and it's kind of stuff that you talk about, Filippo. I think there's a little bit of a combination of everything. I think there's a trickle down from top to bottom. It comes from, I think, also a little bit of the U.S. men's national team that also kind of trickles down into MLS. I think we don't see enough MLS teams play other teams outside of other countries. And the thing is, too, even when MLS teams play in the CONCACAF Champions League or CONCACAF Champions Cup, whatever you want to call it, they look scared. They don't play well. They don't and the thing is, too, when we talk about the Sounders winning the CONCACAF Champions League, honestly, in their final first leg match against Pumas, they didn't play that well. They got, honestly, a get out of jail free card with 2 penalties, and they got out of there with a clean slate. But in all honesty, and even then, when Sounders played against Al Ali in the Club World Cup, I think they played very pessimistically. They didn't play to their best of their abilities because I think we see that a little bit with the U.S. men's national team, that when they don't play in the U.S., there's almost a little bit of that fear factor, that pessimisticness with them. They're just not themselves. And they have the talent. We know the Sounders have the talent. We know the U.S. men's national team have the talent. Kind of what you guys brought up in the Youth World Cup for the youth U.S. men's national team. They have the talent. They have the players. It just almost is like a stigma that because they're not playing on home turf, and also they don't have the experience. Because I think MLS, one thing they do wrong is they kind of always want to force it in the U.S. I think what would have made the Leagues Cup great is if it was played in the U.S. and in Mexico. But again, that's a whole different discussion for another time. And one thing too, especially with LAFC, if LAFC were that great, then win a CONCACAF Champions League final as well. I mean, if they're all
Which
that
they
great,
lost.
yeah, they
it
lost
too.
both times. They've been in it twice. They bottled it both times, and so you know, I would just say, I think there just needs to come, and I think especially in Asian football, because I've obviously followed the Asian Champions League. Persepolis, Esteghlal. Those are two Iranian teams that play in it. So, I see when the Asian teams playing it, there's a bit of a different mindset too, and I think that trickles down from the Asian national teams. When you think about Saudi Arabia, you think about Iran, South Korea, Japan. I think that trickles down a little bit within the club teams because most of those players, for the most part, play on the national team as well. And so I think there's a little bit more of that cohesion with the kind of from national team to league. And I think the problem is with MLS is they just don't have a lot of experience. And like when they do play, they don't really go for it as much. And especially I think for the Sounders, playing all elite, I will say this till the day I die. We were not unlucky. We did not take it to them. We could have. And Brian Schmetzer played that game very pessimistically. He made subs way too late. He didn't try to, I think the difference between All Elite and the Sounders, they made subs to win the game. The Sounders made subs to send it to extra time. And you know what? That costed them.
But Shayon, at the end of the day, that was the team that was the punching bag of the tournament.
That's what I'm saying. That's what makes me mad.
And Al Hilal was actually the big surprise of the tournament, knocking out Flamengo. That was extremely unexpected. Flamengo has been a dominant force in South America for the past 5 years at least. They've always been big, but the past 5 years, they're the richest club in South America, and they have a lot of good players, but they still lost to Al Hilal, which is, again, it brings the point, which I'm going to get to this point, which I think what happens when we talk about the Saudi league being better, it kind of goes back to when we talk about some European leagues, right? The top teams in the Saudi league right now would probably all three be the three favorites to win MLS. The top three, they'd probably be the three favorites to win MLS. And then when you start going down on the Saudi league, the bottom teams, the very bottom teams, they're probably barely professional. The last two, the ones that get relegated, right? That's probably the difference. While Major League Soccer doesn't have any team at that level, right? I mean, Inter Miami tried to be at that level, but then they signed Messi. They tried, but then they signed Messi. Let me just explain to everyone watching this right now why the top teams in the Saudi league are the best ones. What happened, I believe, was last year. Or I don't know how long ago. It was very recently. The Saudi Arabian Public Investment Fund bought like 75% of the top four teams in the league, which was Al Nasser, which everyone knows. It's the Cristiano Ronaldo team. Al Ittihad, Al Hilal, which is the best team, actually, the one we were just talking about. And then Al Ahli. Al Ali. I hope I pronounced it right. If not, someone from Saudi Arabia watching this can correct me. They bought them. They invested. They bought these superstars. Now they're getting those what we called second tier players that we talked about, like Gustavo Gomes from Palmeiras. That's the captain of the Paraguayan national team. And then it brings me to another question here from you guys. Just based off those names these teams signed and knowing, like we talked about, Al Hilal would be the best team in MLS, in my opinion, right now. It would be the best team. And then the other ones are below it, but they're up there. And Al Nasser with Ronaldo's investing. Do you think the case might be that maybe the overall competitiveness of the league, because you talked about, Kelvin, how these teams have the mentality to compete. There's a competitiveness there. So obviously we're not experts in the Saudi league. I've watched highlights of that league, so I can't make an honest judgment of the quality of that league. But don't you think the evidence based on what we saw from their teams in other competitions, like we talked about the Saudi Arabian national team in the World Cup, those are all players from the Saudi league. And they looked competent. They gave Mexico a hard time. They got lucky and defeated Argentina, but they still defeated Argentina. And even the penalty kick that Argentina got was a bit iffy, if we will go into that. So wouldn't we say that league seems to have a bit more maybe intensity or competitiveness besides the very bottom teams that are terrible?
Well, I think it's a double-edged sword. I mean, it's really hard. I mean, all joking aside, it's really hard to really, if you take a look at how many World Cup games Saudi Arabia has won, they beat Argentina, which is, one of the biggest results or upsets in the history of the World Cup, and still couldn't get out of their group. But the United States, with even lesser quality than the one that we took to this World Cup, every time we've been able to eke out a historic performance or a historic win in the group stage, we've actually been able to get out of our group. It happened when we beat Portugal in 2002. We got to the quarterfinals. When we beat Colombia in 1994, we at least made it out to the next round, and we were eliminated by Brazil on July 4th. in a crazy way against Ghana as well in 2014. We started winning, then we dropped. We've always been able to always kind of, all right, we got the good result. We've been able to kind of get out of our group. Well, Saudi Arabia, they had 1994. They had a major coming out party. Saudi Arabia, way before all of this that we're talking about. When Saudi Arabia first played their first World Cup in 1994, they made it out of and it's the only time they got out of their group in the 94 World Cup in the United States. And everybody was very impressed about the Saudi Arabian national team. I'm not an expert in Saudi Arabian soccer. I don't know what happened to that generation. 4 years later, they were whipping boys in France '98. They lost 8-0 against Germany in 2002.
That's
And
where Miroslav Klose had his way,
yeah,
right? And
I mean, I think it was basically 4 goals in one half. It was because Germany didn't want to keep scoring. It's because that game ended 8-0.
we should have beat
Uh,
Germany in that World Cup, but that's a different
and
topic.
Greg Berhalter was scored a goal. Imagine
He did.
what a hero he would have been
Yeah.
today had that goal had gone in. But nonetheless, Saudi Arabia's most significant result, it comes on the back end of, they looked impressive. But then again, they beat an Argentina team that was more nervous about losing than what they were about winning their first game, and they lost. And they, held their own against probably one of the worst Mexican teams I have ever seen at a World Cup. And they still couldn't get out of their group. And I think in that regard, again, when you take away the layers, I think on average we've got better players, more professional players, more players ready to be professionals. Now I think there are certain cultural aspects of the game in which maybe even a Saudi Arabia player or a player from the Middle East is a little bit ahead of the U.S. Because look, you just mentioned it. What's the parameters that you have, for example, in the Middle East when you're playing in their club competitions? Everybody's kind of coming from the same place, right? The same kind of backgrounds, the same kind of team setups, the same kind of fields, the same kind of cultures. South America, the same thing. Well, I think in the United States, what's happening to us when we play in the CONCACAF Champions League, or if we play in Copa Libertadores, will be a big eye opener for us. Is that we got a lot of players we have a generation of players who are accustomed to the installations of MLS, and they think that the professional soccer world is the Premier League. And then they start going to Costa Rica, then they go to El Salvador, then they go to places where they don't even have hot water, and it's a big culture shock to these guys. And the only guys who kind of seem to know where they're at are the South American guys. I was like, yeah, this is what I go through all the time. I remember Guillermo Barros Escaloto, when he first got to the Columbus Crew, when he gave an interview in Argentina, that was the one thing that he started talking about. It's like, yeah, MLS is growing, but they have to change culture. They have this vision of what professional soccer is, which is completely different from the rest of the world. I mean, if you take a look at the Premier League, nobody's the Premier League, for the exception of maybe the Bundesliga, some teams in Italy, not even all teams in Italy. And the rest of the world is kind of different. There's a lot of bells and whistles that are missing. So I think we need to work on the culture. Say, hey, look, your aspirations to play in the Premier League, but you're going to face and be in competitions and play against opponents that are not Premier League, that they come from there are teams that come from nothing and don't have everything, and they're fighting for every ball like it's their last ball. And I think that's what needs to change culturally for the American player to kind of be able to assimilate in these kind of situations. There's a crop of guys that we have that I think are rising to that occasion. A Pulisic, Clint Dempsey definitely did it in many occasions. Tat Ramos back in the day. Today, Gio Reyna you could throw into the mix. I mean, we have had players that have been able to play in those kind of competitions and all kind of competitions. But on average, we still need our guys to get accustomed a little bit to how it's done in the rest of the world. And I think maybe in certain areas, still players in Asia or in the Middle East have an advantage because they kind of all on the same track. They all kind of know what to expect in these kind of competitions, and we're always constantly shocked because, again, every time our league continues to grow, more and more players are getting thrusted into these situations, and they're just simply not used to them.
Oh, sorry, I was muted here for a second. So, guys, let me show you one thing here that is quite interesting. So, market value is one metric that you can use to measure quality. It's not the be all. It's not. It's not like the factor, but I just want to show you one thing that's interesting. When you go to the Saudi league and you look at market value, this is all the way here at the right, right? You can see here at the right, market value. Al Hilal, the whole squad has 140 million euros in market value. Then Al Nasser, 89. Then Etihad Club, 77. Those top three right there have a very high market value. And then when you go down, Al Ali, which is another team that the fund is investing at, they're at 51 million. Now look at the drop off for the next one, 24, half, right? You cut it in half. But it gets worse. Look at the bottom, 1 million, which means this team is probably bizarre, right? Bizarre. Like Christian Roldan has a higher market value. Of course, I'm not crazy. I know market value is not like, oh, he has a market value, he's better. There's a lot of things that go into it. But it is a metric that when used like this, you can kind of understand that there's a gap in terms of money in the league. And the consequence of that is a gap in quality, right? So this is the league, the Saudi league. Now, when I show you MLS, and I'm going to show you MLS now, you will see that the top teams actually have a lower market value. So Inter Miami is the highest market value right now in Major League Soccer. They're at 70 million. The top three in the Saudi league were 140, 89, and 77. And they're going to go up because they're signing more expensive players, right? So again, the top three in the Saudi league are higher than our top one in Major League Soccer. But the difference between Major League Soccer and the Saudi league is you don't see this massive drop in Major League Soccer. The worst team in the league, which is St. Louis in terms of market value, and by the way, they lead the league. Keep that in mind, which is the crazy part of all of this, is 29 million, right? So MLS, in terms of like investment, for obvious reasons, right? The regulations, the salary cap, it's far more balanced than the Saudi league. But I'm gonna be a bit more fair with MLS. The Saudi league that I just showed you has 18 teams. So let's stop at 18 for MLS. At 18, it's 39 million. So the gap from number 1 to 18 is what, like 40 million, while the gap from number 1 to 18 in the Saudi league is 139 million. So I think, and I'm going to bring it back to Cheyenne now because I let Kelvin talk, so I'll let Cheyenne talk. What's quite clear to me, it goes back to that discussion. The top three, maybe top four of the Saudi league would all be title contenders in MLS, arguably the best teams in MLS, right? The most expensive teams with the better players. Doesn't mean they would win, especially knockout rounds. But the bottom teams in in the Saudi league, and I think looking at that ranking right there, probably the bottom like 6 or so, they're probably the equivalent of like average USL teams. Would that be a fair assessment without watching it, right? So this is a bit of an ignorant statement. I am fully aware of that. But based off that, the gap that we're seeing there, would that be somewhat of what we would argue here? You're muted,
Sure.
Sean. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I would say
Yeah.
so.
So, with all this talk that we had here, did anyone change their mind in regards to the leagues? Because I'll tell you my perspective overall. I think the Saudi league is better. I think there's more of a competitiveness, and like you said, that builds up the mentality of the player. And with the players they're signing, and if they sign these players we mentioned, Gustavo Gomez, Mitrovic, Fabinho, add more of these guys to this team, these top teams right there in the league will probably. Well, they are already better than MLS, the top teams. And then for anyone that says in the comment section, but these guys are only going to Saudi Arabia because of the money. Of course, that's what's attracting them. But again, why do most of the veterans that come to MLS came to MLS? It's also money. I agree that like for Messi, it's also lifestyle, right? But it's not like Messi's coming to MLS because he wants a new soccer career challenge. That's not why he came to MLS, right? It's not like when he moves to a club in Europe, oh, I'm going back to Barcelona because I want to win the Champions League. That's not why Messi came here, right? He'll probably not probably, he'll still ball out because it's freaking Messi, but he didn't come here to win it. Like, doesn't care. That's not why he's here. And that's the case for many players. We see that with Shaqiri, Insigne. I can keep mentioning many, many, many other players. Douglas Costa with the Galaxy, right? And I think the main difference when I talked about, just to finish my point, when I gave that list of the players that signed with Saudi Arabia, all these players I mentioned here, every single one of them still has a market in a top five league. Some of them have a market in Champions League contenders, the players I mentioned. While MLS, when they sign good players, these are the good MLS signings. They signed Ricky Puig, great player, but the reason he came was he failed at Barcelona. He could have still played for a top five league and done fine, but it's not like he was standing out. These players were all standing out still. They were all still standout players that I mentioned. MLS has done a great job, better job than Saudi Arabia, signing young South American prospects that come in with hunger and wanting to perform, and also getting some players that aren't cutting it in Europe, like Cucho Hernandez, right? Bring him over to MLS. Come here, perform, then go back to the Premier League or whatever. You have the talent. That's one thing MLS does better. But overall, right now my point stands. I think the Saudi league is better, and when this transfer window is done, they're still going to probably make 3 to 4 more big signings based off the rumors, which I didn't believe the rumors at first. Now I believe them because they're happening, and they're still going to make some of these tier 2 signings that a lot of people don't know the players, like we mentioned, the Palmeiras center back and many others. They try to get Pedro from Flamengo too. They're going to get someone there. Once they get those signings, I think the league will just be overall more competitive. The only issue with it is, again, you're playing teams all the way down on the table that are probably the same level as like St. Kitts and Nevis.
Part of my ignorance, but all these signings are they still kind of between the same 4 or 5 teams, or is there's another team
There,
showing up?
there's one or two. I can give you name by name the teams. I can pull it up here. They're mainly on those top four. They're
Yeah,
mainly on those.
I
Yeah.
think that's going to be the major issue for Saudi Arabian soccer going forward, that it doesn't become a Harlem Globetrotter kind of league where you have
Mhm.
5 teams. I mean, most of the leagues are structured like that and all over the world, maybe with the exception of MLS, and you can even throw in Liga MX at times with the parity issue. I mean, eventually teams start to spread out, and there's the best teams and there are the worst teams. But yeah, I mean, I think the one thing I do want to mention,
No, just
especially in the
to just to answer your question, yes, the big signings are pretty much all with those top three. What I've noticed here that happened is some teams like Shabab, which is also a strong team there, one of the
yeah
competitive
they
ones.
they want
th-
yeah.
they signed some of the players that were left over from those, like Cuejar moved from one team to them, and he's a good defensive midfielder. They also have like a veteran that you probably remember from Argentina, Ever Banega, that played in
Yeah,
Europe.
Ever Ranega for
Yeah,
Valencia. Yeah,
yeah. So they
Boca
also have
Juniors.
Carlos Jr., the Brazilian winger. That's also a good player. So there's that's like the level of the other teams. It's like competitive second tier players that are good in South America, right? Which would be good in MLS. That's like the probably the after those top four, that's probably like 5 through like 7, and then after that, it's a big drop off, like very
Yeah.
bad quality.
I mean, the only thing I really wanted to get across, and again, thank you for inviting me on. We've been talking for such a long time off, and I actually had a chance to interview you once. But I think what I do want to get across here is that I think there are two different paths, and I'm very curious to see what the path that Saudi Arabia is going to take, because we've seen this kind of happen before in Saudi Arabia. A little bit of an influx of money, a couple of stars, a couple of named coaches. A lot of named coaches have gone there, mostly South American coaches more than anything else have gone there to earn a quick buck and then come back. I want to see if this is actually going to lead to like building blocks. I think we can all agree that through its flaws, MLS has kind of found its way over the years. And
Mhm.
yes, there's room for Lionel Messi, but I think clearly everybody has to know that MLS wants to become a player in the transfer market. I think that's how they see viability, sustainability for their teams in the long run, selling American players. Thiago Almada is probably going to get sold for the highest transfer fee ever paid for an American a player from Major League Soccer. I mean, that's what MLS wants to do, is to be a player in the transfer market. We will have to see kind of how this plays out in Saudi Arabia, where it's going to be a while before we see if this was once again finally a push for Saudi Arabia, and which for the love of the game, I'm hoping, because it's good for the world to see. Well, there's different places where soccer can become big, and there can become competitive leagues. And I just hope that this isn't, and I don't want to get political. I just hope this isn't the sports washing from Saudi Arabia.
Mhm.
That's going to be 3 years of all of this, and then when it cools off, like, okay, we did this. Oh, in 5 years we'll do this again. Hopefully, this will lead to building blocks, because it's a soccer mad country. They've been a consistent country that's gone to the World Cup. They haven't performed very well at the World Cup, but they're there. We've seen talented Saudi Arabian players. Hopefully, this will lead to hopefully that country can finally take the next step. Which I'm assuming that this is why this is happening.
Yeah, I don't want to go into politics also as well, but I think it is a bit of sports washing to get a bid for the 2030 or 2034 World Cup that they want. I think that's the end goal. And once that's achieved, they'll probably invest a bit less. But Shayan, final thoughts. Did anything that I say change your mind a bit or make you think at least?
Well, luckily for you, Filippo, I knew most of these things going into today's video, but I appreciate you, reminding me about everything. But honestly, for me, I think, I've thought about the whole, the Saudi Pro League bringing in these players, and I think for you, I think you make a good point with the takeaway it being for them to have a chance to maybe host a bigger international tournament. For me, I think the biggest key for Saudi Arabia and what they're doing, I think they're doing this all for their national team. And why do I say that? Because now every kid's going to want to go to a Saudi Pro League game and see Cristiano Ronaldo. I want to go see Ruben Neves or like whoever, Koulibaly. I don't know who they like out there, but whoever, that's going to get more kids into playing this sport. And I think that's really important for their national team. But in regards to the league, I don't think this develops the league. And I think that's the main point in today's conversation. I don't think this develops the league. And as Kelvin said, it's too early doors to say Saudi Arabia is better than MLS. MLS is a proven quantity league. We have seen success in this league. We have seen players be developed, be flocked off, be it Americans, be it South Americans, unlike the Saudi league where it's a little bit still up in the air. And I think what they're trying to do is get their national team to be better. And I know you guys kind of slagged off Saudi Arabia a little bit. They were lucky against Argentina. I don't think that was luck. In my opinion, I've seen Argentina get cut knife to the sword and against Asian football nations. I don't think that was luck. I think Saudi Arabia are acknowledging, they're investing into building a better national team, and I think this is a good step. I mean, they had a great coach in Hervé Renard, who I think I speak very highly about him every time. It's so unfortunate. Now I believe he's coaching the France women's national team. I wish he would come to another Asian team, cough, Iran. But and you've seen it in Asian World Cup qualification. Saudi Arabia is good. We saw it when they played against the U.S. They didn't even field their first team, and the U.S. still looked silly against them. And so I think they've acknowledged that their national team's starting to take steps. And I wasn't a big fan that you guys kind of hit a little bit of digs at them because I think I'm really impressed with what this national team is doing, and I
I
think
didn't
them
have
and
digs. I defended them.
I know a bit, but you guys had small digs, minor digs. Luckily, I'm not Saudi Arabian, but I'm just saying this is good for their national team. In regards to the league, my point still stands. It's not a good system. We've seen this with the Chinese Super League. Let's do a little throwback here. Chinese Super League did the same thing. Where are they now?
A bit different. I should probably make a video.
They're like cousins.
No, it's a bit different. It's a bit different. I don't have time to explain in this video. People can look up what happened to the Chinese Super League and what signings they made and what was right, what was wrong. And there's also a difference in terms of level for national team, right? Saudi Arabia actually has a competent national team. Yeah. China's national team is garbage. It's terrible, right? And China has issues.
Put it lightly, Filipo.
Yeah, I was trying to be nice to it, but it's just like
that's about as nice as we can get.
They'll compete with San Kitts and Nevis here. They'll compete, but guys,
would Jesus Ferreira score a hat trick against China?
Against China, they're a Caribbean island. Though. But no, I agree with you guys in that sense. Of MLS is a much more mature league, even though it's younger than the Saudi league. The Saudi league is from the 70s. MLS is younger. It's a more mature league, better infrastructure. I said that in the beginning. I'm just saying that right now, I think the Saudi league made signings from the star power and second tier players that it's more competitive. But of course, that comes to show that probably the bottom 6 teams are horrendous. And when comparing to MLS, they would be better. But again, MLS doesn't really have consequences for finishing the bottom, so that shouldn't really matter at all.
They need to do this MLS All-Stars versus Saudi Pro League All-Stars.
Everyone's
commenting this. Everyone wants it.
Cristiano Ronaldo opened up a can of worms. It's gotta be.
Dude, hire us. MLS. You said MLS might be watching. MLS. Start it cooking.
Well, could you? And they could market it as Ronaldo versus Messi. People would watch that.
I think there's nothing that Cristiano Ronaldo doesn't say that he's thought about it 2 hours before ahead of time. That comment was very much something that he had on the top of his mind, and he wanted to say it, and he said it, and here we are. I mean, we're not the only ones doing the video about this, and there's going to be tons of insecure American soccer fans that are going to talk about how better they are than Saudi Arabia. And again, it's a great I think Don Garber, who's the king of taking advantage of situations, I mean, this is the perfect one. The next year, it's got to be Saudi Arabia versus MLS for the All-Star game.
And I'm going to end it on this. For everyone that says that my channel is filled with MLS hating viewers, I put this poll out. And to be fair, there will be many more votes. It's only been 2 hours. There's 2,000 votes there. We're going to get many more. But regardless, the result is clear. 80% have voted for Major League Soccer, 20 for the Saudi League. So
I think 80% voted for Messi over Cristiano Ronaldo.
maybe,
Barring whatever it is.
maybe. But everyone, go follow Kelvin on Twitter. His link or his handle's right there, right below his head. And make sure to go follow Next Generation Football on Twitter, YouTube, and much more. And if you're a Sounders fan and you end up watching this video, go support him on Rave Green. Is that correct, Sean?
And you forgot TV.
TV. He has TV because he copied my name. All right. Thanks for watching, everyone. Drop a like before you go. Bye-bye.
Take it easy.